We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of Planet Holyrood. I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record, and I'm joined this week by the Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar, who has ambitions of becoming the next First Minister after the Holyrood election next year. Hello again.
It's a pleasure to be here, Paul.
So look, we're going to talk about 2025, 2026, the election, your strategy, policy. Just want to briefly talk about one story we did recently. That was in relation to Pam Duncan-Glancy. Now, you'll remember the story was that she was education spokesperson, and then we revealed that she still had this friendship with the convicted sex offender, Sean Morton. When we approached the party, she stood down as education spokesperson, and I think you later said that she was right to do so. Just one thing I want to ask about that. Has she given the party an assurance that she is no longer friends with Sean Morton and that friendship is a thing of the past?
Well, first thing to say is, as soon as I became aware of that, I was deeply concerned, as you'd imagine. I think it's important to stress that no one is suggesting there was any illegality from Pam herself, but it wasn't appropriate to keep that friendship going. It was right that she stepped down from her position and apologise for keeping that friendship going. And our expectation is, and our belief is, that that friendship will now come to an end. And what she should instead focus on is delivering for her constituents and actually being the great campaigner that Pam is actually well known for. If you think about Pam's backstory, who she is as an individual, what she projects in the Parliament, that's the positive story that she has to tell and portray and deliver for people, and that has to be ultimately her focus. But it's not appropriate to maintain such a friendship, and that's why she did the right thing to step back from the front bench. And I hope she's reflected on that. I hope she does accept that it was a wrong judgment, and instead she now has to focus and put all her focus on to rebuild trust and to focus on the issues that I know she cares so deeply about in her own community in Glasgow, but actually for broader Scotland.
Do you expect that friendship to be over now?
Yes.
Okay, look, just looking ahead to January, I think we're going into election overdrive. I think you've got a speech, State of the Nation speech on the 5th of January. We've got the budget the week after, so it's all hotting up. Just tell me from a Scottish Labour perspective, how do you see early next year panning out?
Look, I think the campaign needs to start straight away in 2026. It is our opportunity for the first time in almost 20 years to change the government here in Scotland, to take a different direction here in Scotland. And what you're going to see really early is that we are going to unleash the biggest, most significant political campaign in the history of Scotland next year, starting from the 5th of January, so we can take our country in a different direction. And never has it been more important. So people will know the rights and wrongs of an SNP government, but what they will start to see from the 5th of January is what we will do differently if we take that different direction. Because ultimately that is the choice. The choice is going to be a third decade of the SNP with John Swinney as First Minister, or a different direction for Scotland with me as First Minister. And I will prioritise fixing our NHS, clearing the backlog, making sure it's fit for the future, making sure all our young people have the opportunity to succeed, not just those that choose to go to university, but actually those that want to go into an apprenticeship or college or straight into work. How do we support all our kids to make sure they can maximise their potential? How do we respect people's money, end the waste, the culture of waste under this SNP government, so every penny of taxpayer money is spent properly and to maximum effect? And how do we make sure our communities feel safer? Because right now we've got far too many police officers that are stuck in A&E departments because of the stresses in the National Health Service, or stuck in courtrooms because of the failure to properly run our justice system. 90% or more not even giving evidence in court, but stuck in courtrooms, and instead get those police officers on the streets in communities, making people feel safer in their own places. And how do we get a house building revolution in our country so we can do that great bridge of social and economic policy to get Scotland building again? That is the positive offer we are going to make to the country, and I'm enthused by it, energised by it, and excited by it, because what John Swinney and the SNP will want to do is talk about anything but the record and talk about anything but Scotland. I'm going to make this election campaign about Scotland. I'm going to make it about the future direction of Scotland, and it's a campaign I'm absolutely determined to win.
So if you get where Scottish Labour is just now, the opinion polls have you around about 17 to 19 points behind the SNP. Would you accept that that deficit, that gap, is caused by the UK Labour government rather than anything that you've done yourself?
Well, I think it's safe to say that people have very strong views on a UK Labour government. They have very strong views of senior figures in a UK Labour government. But what they're voting for in 2026 is not to send a message to Westminster. What they're not voting for is to change a UK Labour government. What the election in 2026 is about our schools. It's about our hospitals. It's about our care homes. It's about our policing. It's about our local funding. It's about our housing system. It's about our transport system. And whilst the opponents will want to make it about a government somewhere else and want to say, let's make a judgment based on a party that's been in government for 18 months somewhere else rather than a party that's been in government for almost 20 years here in Scotland, I think that disrespects the people of Scotland. I think that disrespects the significance of that election. This is not a non-consequential election. This is an election that's going to have consequences for every family in every part of our country. And that's why I'm going to make this election about Scotland. And that's why we're going to make sure we win this election. And the choice is not going to be Keir Starmer or Rachel Reeves standing to be First Minister. It's going to be me or John Swinney that's going to be First Minister after the election. And that's a competition I absolutely relish and one I'm confident we can win.
Do you think that voters in Scotland make a distinction between Scottish Labour and UK Labour? I mean, clearly, you set your own policies, you're in charge of candidates, day-to-day running is down to you. But, I mean, do they make a distinction there?
Well, I think if you look at, you mentioned the polls, I think a lot of why the gap, in my view, is exaggerated is because I think people are not currently thinking about the Scottish election or framing what the choice is in that election. It's similar to what I said actually in the run up to the general election, but I've actually thought when we were miles behind the SNP that we would still have a good chance of competing and a good chance of winning because as soon as people's minds shifted to thinking about what the choice was in 2024, their opinion would shift. And I think the same for 2026. I think right now all the dialogue, all the attention is on the rights and wrongs of a UK Labour government. But when people have to make a choice, who is our First Minister? Who is our government in Scotland? And what are they going to prioritise? I do not think they're going to look at a tired, out of touch, out of ideas John Swinney and think he's the answer. If we honestly think that the future of Scotland and the dynamic future we have and the aspiration and the ambition we have for Scotland is met by John Swinney and the SNP, I don't believe so. What I'm determined to deliver is a First Minister who shares the ambition of the people of Scotland and a government that works as hard as the people of Scotland do. We don't have that right now with the SNP.
I mean, I do think that this election is going to be determined by the frame of the election. So if the frame is the last 5 years, the SNP's record and the vision of the future, clearly you've got a chance. If the frame is a referendum on Keir Starmer, I think you're going to lose. So how do you win that framing battle? How do you ensure that when people go to the polls in May, that it's the devolved issues that they're voting on, not the reserved issues?
So right, I actually agree that whoever wins the battle of framing will win the election. And isn't it interesting that you have so the SNP will want to shout at us and say, he's a unionist politician. I'm the person that wants to make the election about Scotland. John Swinney, the nationalist politician, is the one that wants to make the election about Britain. I want to make the election about Scotland. I'm confident if the election is about Scotland, that the SNP will lose and that we will win. I want to make the election about Scotland's hospitals. He wants to make it about Keir Starmer. I want to make it about Scotland's schools, Scotland's skills system, Scotland's housing system, Scotland's local communities, Scotland's policing, and the opportunities that Scotland's young people have. He wants to make it about Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage, by the way. I think John Swinney is obsessed to make the election about anything but the SNP's record or what the future looks like for Scotland based on the powers we have here in Scotland.
Do you think it's in the interest of Swinney to put Farage front
and I
and
think that
centre?
will expose him.
Is it in Swinney's interest to put Farage front and centre of this election?
Yes, and I think you saw that in the Hamilton by-election, where he wants to talk up reform, I want to beat reform. He wants to talk down the opportunities and the potential we have in Scotland, I want to maximise the potential we have in Scotland. He wants to talk down the ambition that we can have for a functioning government here in Scotland to deliver for the people of Scotland. I want to talk up what we have the potential to do here in Scotland. We've got the talent, we've got the people, We've got the resources and we've got the powers to transform Scotland. But if only we had a First Minister that shared that ambition. And I'm absolutely determined that we deliver on that ambition here in Scotland because we can transform our country. And that's the other point I'd make, Paul, is the election in 2026 cannot be a protest election. It can't be a tinkering around the edges election. It can't be oh, this is just simply about rejecting the hate of reform election. It has to be an election that is about transforming our country and not tinkering around the edges. And that's what I want to do. That's what I'm in this for. Is I know Scotland is the greatest country in the world, but if only we had a government that was as good as our people were, we'd be in a much different position. I want to deliver a government in this country that's as good as our people and shares the ambition of our people. And that's why I'm confident that if we get that message out and we give that bold, significant, biggest campaign in the history of Scotland, that will make that a reality. I believe we have a better leadership than the SNP do. I believe we have better resourcing than the SNP do. I believe we have a better ground operation than the SNP do. I believe we have a better digital operation than the SNP do. I believe we have a stronger message than the SNP do. I believe we have a stronger policy offer than the SNP do. But we have to win the argument. And through hard work, energy, and humility, and would go round the country and demonstrate that John Swinney's not as good as he gets, that we can have a different future for Scotland. And I hope I represent that and I can persuade people of that over the next 5 months.
Do you expect Reform, who are currently soaring in the polls in Scotland, to play the race card against you, question your identity in the same way that they did in the Hamilton by-election?
Well, you've got to judge people by their past behaviour as well as the kind of people that they project to be. What they did in Hamilton, Larkhall, and Stonehouse was an utter disgrace, where they tried to question my loyalty to my country, Scotland, tried to question my belonging to my country, Scotland. Scotland doesn't belong to Nigel Farage or to his ilk, it belongs to all of us. And yes, there'll be different people with different ideologies in Scotland, but I want to be a kind of politician in Scotland that doesn't look to find difference and use it to divide our country, but looks to find difference and find solutions to problems to bring our country together. That's ultimately what the choice is going to be in 2026. There's going to be two kinds of politician in 2026. There's going to be the kind of politician, and sadly, I think John Sweeney and the SNP fit into this also, who look at a problem and think, how do we use people's legitimate frustration to further divide us to try and gain political influence and power? That's one kind of politician. And the other kind of politician is someone that says, here's a problem, this is what I'm going to do to fix it and bring our country together. And that's the kind of politician I am. I want to bring our country together to end SNP incompetence and to take us in a different direction. And we have to have more ambition as a country than just saying, just rejecting the poison of reform is enough in an election. I want to reject the poison of reform, but also make our country a better place in the process for people that work in our magnificent NHS, for people that rely on our magnificent NHS, for people that rely on a skills system and all the different industries we have across Scotland. We need a government that thinks its job is more than just protest or posturing or trying the whole system of cover up and secrecy like we've seen from the SNP in recent months and sadly in recent years as well. We need a government that shares the ambition of the people and, as I've said already, works as hard as our great people do.
Do you think that the sort of racist subtext of what Reform have been saying about you in that bit is that Anas Sarwar, he's not really Scottish?
Well, I think the implication is he's not one of us. He's not loyal to here. His loyalties lie somewhere else. I was born in Scotland, brought up in Scotland, brought up in Glasgow. I went to school in Glasgow. I went to university in Glasgow. I worked in our NHS in Renfrewshire and Paisley. I have been in public life for almost 20 years. I have dedicated all my adult life to service and public duty, whether that was working in the NHS or being in politics as a parliamentarian, because I believe there is no greater country than Scotland. It has given my family everything. My granddad arrived here with absolutely nothing in the 1940s, and every opportunity that my family's had the privilege and honour to have is because of how great this country, Scotland, is and how amazing its people are. But it's being failed. It does not have a government that meets the ability and the ambition of our country. And I want to give back to my country, Scotland. I want to give the best years of my life to this country, Scotland. And I want to demonstrate to people that we don't need to play the politics of fear and blame. Instead, we can embrace who we are as a nation, a open, tolerant, welcoming, hardworking, ambitious nation that has a higher sight for itself. That's the kind of Scotland I want us to be. That's the kind of Scotland I want to deliver. And I'm willing to put in the hard yards to make that reality. And I believe making that argument, demonstrating that energy, demonstrating that passion, and that humility, that we can reject both reform and we can end SNP rule and demonstrate we can do things differently here in Scotland.
So I want to talk to you about policy at a policy conference in Edinburgh recently. One of the stories that we did was that you support a review of the sentencing guidelines for under 25s, which pretty much say that there's a presumption against jail or custodial sentences for people in that age cohort. Why have you decided to come out in favour of that position?
Look, I think the tragedy is that there's far too many of our communities that feel unsafe. And whilst I believe that we have amazing young people in our country and we don't back them enough with the skills they need or the quality of education they deserve or the access to the employment market they deserve or the support they need if something goes wrong in their life or they get unwell in their life, there are still far too many communities that are blighted by crime and the fear of crime. And there's incidents, for example, of people abusing bus drivers, attacking bus drivers. That's not appropriate. We've got to take appropriate action. There are still far too many incidents of knife crime in our country, and someone who commits a heinous crime should get the right punishment for that crime, regardless if they're under 25 or over 25. People would expect someone to get the right punishment if they commit a crime as awful as violent crime, sexual crime, or anything else. And therefore, I don't think we've got the balance of it right. And that's why we will look and review the guidelines of under 25s. If you commit a crime, you should pay the appropriate punishment. But at the same time, how are we supporting our young people with access to the education skills they need, access to youth services, access to other amenities in their communities? I just feel as if our young people are being let down, either by being victims or by not getting the support themselves. Our classrooms, for example, don't feel like safe places at the moment. And that's why we've got to have a zero tolerance approach to violence and abuse in our schools. That's why we've got to ban mobile phones in the classroom so we can get kids concentrating on the classes, themselves feeling safe, teachers feeling safe to teach, and allowing our kids to thrive rather than their brains being melted by social media platforms, by algorithms, or by BAMs who want to make life difficult for them in their community. I just don't think we're getting it right now for Scotland's young people.
So specifically on knife crime, I mean, we've seen some awful tragedies in the last year of young people losing their lives to after knife attacks. And in terms of your policy on reviewing the guidelines for,
Sentencing,
I mean, do you think there should be more jail sentences for people who are caught possessing knives?
look, I want us to be as hard as it's appropriate for us to be, because we must have a zero tolerance approach. If you look at the violence reduction unit that worked really, really well in Glasgow to bring down significantly violent crime and bring down knife crime in particular, sadly the SNP tried to cut its funding in recent years, but it has been significant. It's made a meaningful difference. But there are still far too many communities and far too many young people that fall victim to violent crime or the threat of violent crime, and I don't think we're supporting those communities enough. So, yes, if someone commits a violent crime, they should have the appropriate punishment. And I fear we have a mood that says we have a soft touch approach in Scotland. Look what's happening right now. There are outstanding warrants, thousands of outstanding warrants for people who've been accused of drug dealing. That's not appropriate. There are hundreds, sorry, of outstanding warrants for those that have engaged in possession of knives or in potential knife crime. Why? There are people who have been accused of sexual crimes. There are outstanding warrants for. That's not a fit for purpose system. We've got to address that. And then there's a really big backlog in our courts, meaning some cases are timing out. That's not appropriate or fair for the victims either. And we also have a prison system that is fundamentally broken, and many people who should be in prison aren't in prison. So we've got to fix that system. But also many people who need support in the rehabilitation aren't getting that support and rehabilitation. Take addiction issues. We know the tragic situation we have right now in terms of high levels of addiction, high levels of drugs deaths. Our prisons have become places where you actually go to get an addiction rather than to get rehabilitation away from addiction. So our system is fundamentally broken. And that's why I don't believe a tinkering around the edges is going to be enough. We need a much more fundamental reform of our structures, our systems, not just in the justice system. I could talk to you more about our education system and our health system, as well as our local planning, regional economic development system. Every part of how our country operates feels neglected and let down. And one of the reasons for that is we've had a government here in Scotland for the last 18 years that are actually not interested in government. All they're interested in is campaigning, finding areas of difference and disagreement, and picking fights. That's all they're fundamentally interested in. What I'm interested in is doing the bloody job, getting the basics right, fixing the potholes, cutting the grass, picking the weeds, not pretending we're rewilding the nation in the process, rewilding Sucky Hall Street or somewhere else that the SNP wants to pretend. Get the basics right, but also do the hard yards of fixing the most precious parts of our public institutions, which includes our criminal justice system, our policing system, our NHS, our education and skills system, and as I said to you earlier on, a revolution of house building across the country because we have chronically low levels of new builds happening in our country. And that means 10,000 children as we speak over the Christmas holidays right now, 10,000 homeless children in Scotland. Utterly unforgivable. So that's why we need a serious government that's going to do the work and do the hard yards.
Do you agree, though, that if you're carrying a knife with the intent to harm someone, that there should be a presumption that you are going to go to jail for that?
Yes. And we should stop the soft touch approach. Yes, there has to be rehabilitation. Yes, there has to be support around youth services and access to other services for our young people. But there also has to be a demonstration that we as a nation are not going to tolerate someone or a group of people demonizing, threatening, and scaring whole communities, and we're going to take a robust action against it. That is part of who we are. Yes, we've got to do the sympathetic side and the support and the nurturing side, but we've also got to demonstrate we're going to have a zero tolerance approach to this kind of behavior in our country.
The way I see it is, what's the difference between carrying a gun and carrying a knife? This doesn't,
Well, if you've got the intent to hurt or the intent to kill, then you don't deserve to see a cuddly approach. You deserve to see a justice system that's going to be on the side of the victim or potential victims rather than a soft touch approach that we currently have.
So, major issue for daily record readers is the cost of living crisis. I think it'd be fair to say that Scots generally, not just record readers, they're sick of being skint. They're being asked to pay higher income tax for pretty shoddy public services. So, if you become First Minister, will you cut income tax?
That's my intention because I actually believe that the tax burden in Scotland is far too high. I think people are being asked to pay more and more and get less and less. And I don't think any politician would be telling you the truth if they looked at you in the eye or any voter in the eye or any member of the public in the eye and said, we spend every penny of public money well. We don't. There is so much chronic waste in our system, whether it is almost £500 million spent on ferries. We spent more on 2 ferries. We could have bought 10 ferries for the same price. £1 billion on a new Berlin prison. Now, I'm not saying we don't need a new prison. We, of course, do need a new prison, but a prison that was supposed to cost 100 million is now going to cost over £1 billion. That difference could have built 32 community health centres across the country when we have such chronic issues around health and well-being in our country and society. We've got 131 public sector bodies or quangos in Scotland costing us £6.6 billion a year. Are we honestly saying that these are all value for money things that people feel as if they get something meaningful back? It's not. Quite often it actually holds back growth, investment and opportunity. So we've got to strip that right back, free up the money and use it more wisely. And we've got to make sure we're reforming our public services and driving the options for prosperity and growth, the opportunity, for prosperity and growth across our country. So in short, I think the tax burden is too high. I want to see the tax burden come down. But what I'm not going to do is say, I'm going to write the next 5 years budget. We've got to identify where the money is being wasted and stop that waste and spend people's money wisely.
So, in terms of an aspiration, you've got
I should have said much more widely on the cost of living crisis. Is the average, and this is part of my criticism of UK Labour government, is they are not telling their own story. So we've now had the 6th cut in interest rates, meaning the average mortgage is going to be around £1,700 lower since a UK Labour government came to power. Before the budget and the increase in the national living wage and minimum wage again, the average wage was £1,800 higher. It's now estimated to be more than £2,500 higher by the time we get to April, meaning more money in people's pockets. There's, of course, the £300 cut in energy bills for those that are the lowest income households, £150 for the average household. and also pensions have gone up by almost £1,000 as well. They need to tell their own story about what they are doing to help confront the cost of
Why
living
are they not doing
crisis.
that?
Well, let's just say messaging is perhaps not their strong point, but what I'm really clear on is I'm going to spend the next 5 months, it'll be almost 4 months by the time this goes out. I'm going to spend the next between 4 and 5 months making the case for what we're going to do differently in Scotland, because the choice in Scotland is either going to be me or John Swinney. And I want to demonstrate that I've got the ambition, I've got the ideas, I've got the energy to take this great country forward.
Just final question on income tax. We've got 6 bands in Scotland now, very complicated system. What would be your priority in terms of the bands, and which rates would you want to cut?
So there's a quirk in the system, particularly for those that are around the 40,000 mark, where their marginal tax rate is significantly higher compared to other parts of the
That's because of
UK.
NI as well and how it
Absolutely, and also, and the reason why that is important is because the way the fiscal framework is designed, what the median salary is in Scotland also impacts the income we then get that we can spend on our health service and our schools and such like. So we have to fix a quirk around that marginal tax rate. Also helps to attract talent and retain talent in Scotland. But the broader principle is there are some complications in the system. We want to make sure that those on the lowest income are the ones that benefit the most. And we also want to make sure we deliver a proper progressive tax system that doesn't just add tax bands because they think it's a good political announcement to make, when it actually all it does is not generate any money or pushes talent away or acts as a substitute for economic growth. It's going to need a much wider reform than that. And that's what I'm absolutely committed to do. And it's not just around income tax. If you look at our business rate system, I think it needs fundamental reform as well. It is not helping our high streets. It's rigged against the small and medium-sized operators. It's rigged against town centres and city centres in favour of the online giants. That also needs a fundamental reform. And it goes back to the point I'm making. Tinkering is not going to do it. If the SNP were going to do big, bold things, they would have done them by now. If they had a great idea, it'd have been delivered by now. We need something much more fundamental. The answer to every problem is not to create a new public sector body or to create a new benefit, which seems to be the SNP's approach. The answer to our problems is fix the systems and make them fit for the future.
How would you spend the 100+ million that's been freed up for the Scottish Government in terms of their budget as a result of the UK Government getting rid of the two-child benefit cap?
Well, the first thing is, again, a positive delivery from a UK Labour government means that that last budget will be the single largest reduction in child poverty in a single budget ever that was delivered. Over 500,000 children will be lifted out of poverty across the UK, which is transformational, which again is something that they need to be shouting a lot louder about. My view is that that 120 odd million pounds should still go into fighting poverty. But what I don't want to see happen is we just think that that 120 million pound therefore becomes money that we put onto a different benefit. I actually think we should be using that other money to challenge structural poverty. And I'll tell you what I mean by that, Paul, is I fundamentally believe, and it's part of the Labour Party I joined, the Labour Party I believe in, that the best route out of poverty is work. Yes, we need a safety net. Yes, we need a welfare system. And yes, we've got to support those that are in the lowest income, because a lot of families that are in poverty are actually in work, and therefore targeted support does make a meaningful difference. But if you're going to do more than just a sticking plaster, you have to challenge the underlying structural issues that drive inequality and drive poverty. And they are namely a lack of proper investment in education, skills, jobs, criminal justice, we've talked a lot about already, housing, all of these huge issues. And so we are in the process of outlining proposals of how we would use that £120 million to challenge structural poverty, to support those families to get those skills they need and the job opportunities they need to lift their families permanently out of poverty, rather than simply relying on an additional benefit payment.
Final question before we go into the quick fire round.
Oh, we're doing a quick fire. Is that a Christmas quick fire?
Well, I think it's probably a bit too late for that.
New Year quick fire.
A New Year quick fire round. Your opponent for the race for Bute House is John Swinney. And I think I'm right in saying that he is the longest serving parliamentarian in Scotland, because not only has he been an MSP from day one of the Parliament, but I think he was elected to Westminster in 1997 as well. So I don't think there's anyone who's served longer as a parliamentarian. He will say that that gives him the experience to continue being First Minister. How do you see it?
Well, he was elected when I was 14. And no doubt that he has achieved many things in his time in politics. I would say, yes, he has experience, but he's also had his chance. And what we need is a new generation of leadership. We need a different level of energy, and we need someone with a different level of ambition. I think Scotland needs not a caretaker or a bank manager or someone that once thinks his job is to be an accountant. What it needs is an energetic leader that wants to get things done, knock heads together, and pull our country together.
Do you think he's low energy?
And I think he's no energy rather than low energy. And therefore, that's the choice. Now, I've got respect for John. He's given great public service, but he's had his chance to deliver great public service. We need that next generation of leadership, and that's what I want to do. I think I and the people I'm hoping to take into government with me demonstrate a more dynamic, more positive, more ambitious, and more hopeful future for Scotland than John does. So I thank him for his service. Of course, I do. It's a long, dedicated service to Scotland. I don't want to talk that down. He has, of course, served in many roles in government. I've got many disagreements with his performance in many of those roles for Scotland, but no one can doubt that he has given service to Scotland. But he's had his chance. He's had his time. Thank you for his service. But it's time for the next generation.
So 5 quick fire questions. Number 1, who's going to win the Scottish Premiership this year?
Oh, great question. It could be a genuine three-way fight, although Motherwell are not far behind as well. But I still think one of the Glasgow clubs will win.
Which one are you rooting for?
I'll root for Glasgow all the time, Paul. You know I always say I don't get involved in the Glasgow football chat. It's too controversial. Ask me who's going to win the cricket tournament. I might give you a different view. Obviously, Clydesdale Cricket Club.
Question 2, who's been the most impressive member of your shadow cabinet in 2025?
Oh, great question. I think I'm going to go. There's so many. They're going to get jealous of each other.
You have to
They're
pick
going to
one.
get jealous of each other. But I will say Daniel Johnson, because what Daniel has very effectively done is many people often question about, has someone got an experience? Have they got a lived experience? And leading the economics portfolio and the business portfolio, when Daniel's having those conversations about business, he's doing so as someone who's ran a business himself and who understands business. And that's not normal in Labour Party circles, if we're honest about it. So I think Daniel's been brilliant. Of course, Jackie's been magnificent as well. Of course, Michael Mara's been brilliant. Of course, Paul O'Kane's been brilliant. Of course, Paulie McNeil's been brilliant. Neil Bibby's been brilliant.
Pam?
Anyone I've missed? Pam Duncan Glancy was brilliant. Now taking some time out. Paul O'Kane, I don't know if I mentioned him already. So many, they've all been brilliant.
But Daniel's the best. Okay, you made
But
that
I'm
clear.
not saying best. They're all fantastic. And generally, again, what makes the person that's the leader gets the most attention, but the hard work and the energy and enthusiasm that they're all desperate, hungry, and determined to deliver in their own individual portfolios, and that's a great thing for me. That I just need to lead them to victory now in the next 5 months.
Question 3, is it true that you call Jackie Baillie boss?
No.
She's the real boss of Scottish Labour, is she not?
I think I called her something much ruder than that, actually, when I said that she was the DB, which was not Dame Bailey. It was something else, but you'll need to Google it because this is
I know
a PG platform.
Number 4, when was the last time you cried?
Oh my goodness, Paul, you're gonna get me going again. Last time I cried.
Yeah. You're a man who's in touch with his emotions. Come on, reveal it all.
Honest answer. So, I mean, he won't know this, right? So, my dad's 74 now, and the last time I saw him, he has aged quite considerably. You'll hate this, by the way. I'm going to get pillars for this. He's quite a proud man in that sense, but he has aged quite significantly, and so last time I saw him, I felt quite emotional about the fact that he is, of course, aging. That comes to all of us, and that made me feel quite emotional when I went back home.
An easier one. Final question. What's your political prediction for 2026?
So it's going to be an intense campaign. It's going to be at times a very bitter campaign. That's not going to come from us. We're going to be.
Do you think it's going to be better?
I think it's going to be quite a bitter campaign. And the reason why I think it's going to be a bitter campaign is, one, the poison of reform is going to add a different layer of complexity to the election campaign. And an SNP government that's been in power for 20 years is going to try and play every card they can to try and keep a hold of power. And let me be really clear, I'm going to use all my energy and all my enthusiasm and positivity to try and win that election. And I ultimately believe that we will win the election, that we will have a new First Minister in Scotland, and we'll have a Scottish Labour government again, and we'll change the government for the first time in 20 years in Scotland and chart that new direction. I honestly, at my very core, believe it, but we've got to do hard work, and people will see that straight from the new year all the way to the election in May.
Okay, well, look, thanks very much to Anas for joining me, and thanks also
When was
to...
the last time you cried, Paul?
When was the last time I cried?
Here we go.
I don't think my tear ducts work, actually.
Did they not?
No.
You know, not fatherhood not made that.
Did I
Because
cry?
fatherhood made me a bit more emotional.
I think I'm going to give a politician's answer and say, I don't recall.
Really?
Yeah.
Heartless.
Maybe like 40 years ago when I was a wee boy.
Last time you cried was 40 years ago.
That's the last time I remember it. I mean,
Not
as
even
I
a wee
say,
tear in your eye.
the
You
tear
not
duct...
cry when your wee one was born?
No, I
I
don't
was
think so.
bawling when my wee one was born.
All three or just the first one?
All three.
Hmm.
Most for the first one because it's probably the most emotional, but I cried at all three.
Maybe just relief that
I'm not
it
a
was
natural cry. I don't cry very much, but like the birth of my three sons was
maybe,
the-
relief that it was a safe pregnancy and it was fine in the end. But no, I don't think I cried.
No.
Thanks for putting it
We'll
on to
work on
me.
it. Yeah. No. I was just trying to confirm to people who already believe it that Paul Hutcheon doesn't have a heart. I'm just glad we got it on the
No,
record.
it's good to get it on the record. So thanks again to Anas for joining me, and thanks also to Angus from the Daily Record video team who produced this episode. You can listen to Planet Holyrood on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or watch it on the Daily Record YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.